Welcome to the STR Data Lab.
Hello and welcome to the STR Data Lab. I'm Jamie Lane, Chief Economist at ODNA, and we have today a really interesting guest. We have Lewis Andrews, the Director and President of OVO Network, here to join us today. Lewis, welcome to the show.
Hi, Jamie. Thank you very much for having me.
So you are one of our first guests sort of outside the US, sort of joining us. You operate in France, one of the larger operators in France, and really interested to sort of dig in on some of the really unique things about that market, how OVO sort of got started and sort of built itself. You guys built it into the company it is now, but maybe get me started with, and can you give some of the history of OVO and sort of how it got to where it's at today?
Of course. OVO Network is a company that was founded in 2008. The information that I give every time that I say that is the fact that Airbnb was also founded in 2008. So not the same progress or the same evolution, but obviously a totally different world back in 2008. The company was founded by two British entrepreneurs, one of whom was my father, basically ski lovers first and foremost, so people that loved downhill skiing. At one point, they were on a chairlift, looked around themselves, realized that all the properties were empty, and they said, how about we solve that emptiness by creating a rental solution? So they set that up, and it was managed as a lifestyle business until 2020. During 2020, COVID hit, and there was a lot of problems to deal with, as you can imagine. And it's at that point that I joined the company, and kind of as just a simple reinforcement, after which I think opportunities were seized and we decided to take things a bit more seriously, after which I founded the French subsidiary of the company. We now have offices in Annecy, which is in the French Alps, about half an hour away from Geneva in Switzerland. I have 15 full-time employees currently working for me from this office here, and we operate around 220 high-end chalets or high-end ski houses in authentic destinations, we call them.
That's amazing. And I had the opportunity to meet both you and your father, I think at the last Vacation Rental World Summit. What was that? In Barcelona.
Yep, Barcelona, or at one of the scale events. But yeah, we go around.
Yep, that's great. So 220 high-end chalets, 15 employees. That's not a small business by any means in terms of sort of operations and operation complexity.
Yeah, bearing in mind that there's 15, so there's 15 people inside of the team in France, but then we've got a whole international team that's attached to the UK entity. The UK entity, just as a snippet of information, the UK entity's legal name is OVO Software Services, and I think that will then explain a lot of what's to come.
No, really interested to see what that means. So, and 220 listings, and what would you say really differentiates you guys from other operators in the market? So if you're pitching to a homeowner that is going to work with you, and what are the key differentiations that you guys sort of see that makes OVO stand out?
Yeah, I mean, there's one huge one, which is we're not a property manager, quote
Okay.
unquote. Whereas most people will have developed their business by maybe running their neighbor's Airbnb listing and starting to do the cleaning and the maintenance and the welcoming and then upselling and things like that. We actually started as a software company again. So we started by developing our own PMS. And then we developed our own platform, ovonetwork.com. And so since the very beginning, we've not been on the ground doing the cleaning and the maintenance. We've been focusing on what we call optimizing rental performance. So we have teams of account managers, revenue managers, marketing team, et cetera, whereas most people, as you know, will be for a big majority of their bookings reliant on the OTAs, and obviously they'll be managing their business through a third-party PMS, which is where we're very different because we have our own bespoke PMS, as I've said, and around 75 to 80% of our bookings come directly through ovonetwork.com. So we're very, very different, and we work in a very different way, which in turn allows us to have more control, which in turn again allows us to be, I think, more successful than a lot of people, because our focus is primarily on generating bookings and not just making sure that the holiday is exceptional, because that's actually done by somebody whose sole job it is to do that.
Okay. So essentially peeling off the tech piece of a property management company and running that separately. And in the States, I sort of think of the model similar to maybe an Evolve, and where they're solely focused on marketing the property, getting it booked, and then I think importantly too, the revenue management piece. Do you guys do the revenue management side, or is that separate?
Yeah, I've got a full-time employee who's we call her a performance manager, but she's a revenue manager. And then all our account managers also trained in revenue management as well. So they very much, their role is to accompany and coordinate and strategize with our property owners to make sure that their pricing strategy is adequately placed and competitive and things like that.
And then where does guest communication sit? Is that managed by you guys?
Yeah, so that's in part managed by us. It's especially it's purely for it's mostly the pre-sale element of it. So kind of helping guests choose their ideal home, and that's managed by the UK entity, by a group of individuals that kind of all over the world. We've got people in Portugal, the UK, Bolivia, and places like that.
Oh, that's great. So, and 75 to 80% direct is pretty amazing. Especially sort of sitting here in the US, like I feel like if anyone told me they have 75 to 80%, like unless they're like an old school property manager that had been around for 30, 40 years and sort of built up that business of direct business, just keep going. But do you feel like that's unique to OVO, or is that a sort of function of how vacation rentals sort of work traditionally in France?
No, it's entirely unique to OVO. I mean, from a worldwide perspective, you might have slightly different data than me, but things that have been referenced in conferences that we both attended, is the figures have usually been that around 3% of urban property managers get their bookings direct. And then in leisure destinations, so my type of destinations, it's 30%. So we're more than double that 30%. It's not at all due to the French market being any different to any other, especially given the size and the power that Airbnb has in this market. It's much more to do with the fact that, again, we've managed to save time on the cleaning and instead spend that time and investment in marketing, specifically digital marketing, which results in the fact that if you're in France today and you type chalet with jacuzzi or chalet with swimming pool into Google, will be always in the top 3 and most days the top 1. So we get a lot of traffic to our website per month. Again, bearing in mind that we've got just over 200 properties, we attract around 40,000 unique visitors to our website per month. So there's a lot of digital marketing work going on behind the scenes.
So it sounds like a lot of that infrastructure is sort of built for maybe potentially and scale. Like if you're competing on chalet with jacuzzi, like think about who else might be and sort of creating content and bidding on those type of keywords. It's Airbnb, it's Booking, it's some of the largest operators in the world. So and first question is that profitable in terms of bookings, like for you guys? And do you think it's profitable for the average sort of host looking to drive bookings to their property? And secondly, is there sort of a future state where, and you guys have 220 listings now, but and if you're able to compete and drive this amount of bookings, like you would think that could support scale of a much larger and sort of function in terms of listings.
Yeah, totally. Whether it be on the platform side or on the PMS side, with regards to the developments that we've got on that end, the company's tools and products of a quality that I think could should easily be at 500 properties rather than 200. So there's kind of more of a challenge there around converting more owners, increasing our inventory and our portfolio, and specifically actually generating more owner leads. Because I think that that's one area where digital marketing is not quite as useful, especially for us in these hyper local destinations. It's going to be to generate owner leads that they're basically attracted to us and decide to use us as a solution. So that's one of the main things that we're looking to do. With regards to the profitability question that you asked first, the answer is yes, it's profitable, but I'll explain in very, very simple terms why it is. It's because we actually charge a distribution fee to every single booking that comes on our distribution platform. So whereas most people, offering a 15% discount to any guest that comes on their direct platform, and therefore the question is, how profitable is that? Because effectively they're taking the same amount of money, whether it be direct or on the OTA. We're charging a 12.5% distribution fee on our own distribution platform. So therefore, we're basically doubling our revenue each time a booking comes direct.
That's amazing. Is there sort of a challenge in terms of, and you guys are doing and the sort of digital piece, the marketing, but aren't actually responsible for a lot that happens once after a guest check in?
Correct.
But then ultimately, like, I just pulled up the Airbnb host page for OVO Network, like, and the reviews that get left and sort of reflect on your company reflect not only like the booking experience, but also the stay that's happening. And I think remarkably, you guys have a 4.84 and review score on Airbnb, which is pretty great for a company at your scale. And don't typically see someone with 220 listings able to achieve much higher than 4.7 or 4.75. So like, how are you guys able to sort of maintain that consistency, given that you don't control a lot or almost anything that happens after a guest checks in?
Yeah, great question. It's the question that everyone asks. We're the longest running superhost in France on Airbnb. A couple of years ago, we were the second highest rated professional account on Airbnb in the whole of Europe. So,
That's amazing.
given the fact that we don't do any of the welcoming or anything like that, it blows people's minds. I've given actually an entire presentation on this at Scale Barcelona a few years ago.
I was in the audience for it.
Yeah, there you go. Well, the answer's simple. It is a bit of a cop out, but this is the truth, is that our portfolio is extremely well curated, which means that we only work with properties that merit 5-star reviews. So already, in terms of the type of property that we're working with, we're aiming very, very high. And then we make sure that what we call the property managers or the concierges that work on the welcoming and things like that are well trained, that they're the right type of profile, they're the right type of people. And then on top of that, we work really closely with the owners themselves, bearing in mind that we really try and help them make sure that the property is pristine, that it's welcoming. And a lot of the times, around maybe 20 to 25% of our properties are actually managed by the owners themselves. And there's nothing better when you arrive at a property to be greeted by somebody saying, "Hi and welcome to my home," rather than, "Hi, welcome to this empty space that I don't care about. Here are the keys."
Yeah. So I heard maybe some competing sort of goals here of one, like having a highly curated, like 5-star only portfolio, and also wanting to continue to scale it, and sort of an issue with, and how do you continue to generate owner leads? And how do you sort of balance and sort of running this group of, and wanting to scale it larger, but also wanting to maintain that really high quality, and where do you see the trade-offs there?
It's exactly the question that my owner sales team asked me. At the beginning of the year, when I told them I want you to sign 81 properties this year, and they said, "Well, we'll just start signing properties that aren't as good." And I said, "No, I'm implying that they have to be as good as all the others that you've signed." It's a bit of a challenge. But to be clear in terms of numbers, I mean, just so you understand how the market, the French Alps market has evolved over the past, let's say, 6 years. In 2019, between the two departments, so let's call them mini states in which I operate, so the kind of the northern French Alps, which is called Savoie and Haute-Savoie. In 2019, there were 39,000 listings on Airbnb. At the end of 2024, which is the last point at which I looked at this statistic, there were 68,000. Okay, so basically during COVID, what happened was a huge explosion and actually a saturation of the supply. What we've seen is that saturation basically exploded at the same time that demand exploded, typically during COVID, where our type of property, remote location, large property with extra amenities was exactly the type of property that every single person was looking to go to, especially in the French market, which is the second biggest domestic market behind the US. Everyone was coming to the mountains. Now that created a lot of demand. Therefore, that created an explosion in supply. Now what we're seeing is a drop-off of demand. The supply is still there. A lot of operators are dying because they can't keep up with the lack of demand. And that's kind of where we come in, is that we know that we've got the product, we've got the right service. Some of our properties, or at least our best performing properties, have got an occupancy rate of 97% annual, which means that they're basically free a couple of Fridays and Saturdays here and there. But apart from that, they're totally full. And that's kind of where we specialize. So it's not a question of have we run out of properties? Because that's not true. It's more, how do we make sure that enough people, again, not on the web, but in these resorts that are hyperlocal, have heard of us? And that's where there's a kind of a shift that's been going on in OVO Network over the past, let's say, 2 to 3 years, which is we've kind of moved from representing ourselves as a hyper digital English company to a hyper local, quote unquote, French company, or at least the French team are kind of very much presenting themselves as that.
Yeah. And operating in the UK and France, and how would you sort of describe the French market today? Like what sort of differentiates it? And France is not the second largest country in the world in terms of population, and it is maybe the country that generates the most tourism globally. I think famously, it was a very popular market to travel to. But like, can you just describe for a listener that hasn't sort of experienced sort of French short-term rental and culture and sort of holiday culture in France? Like, what is the typical sort of French citizen, and when are they using a short-term rental? How are they using it? Sort of how long have they been using it? Like, and just describe a little bit the culture of short-term rentals in France.
Yeah, I think it's definitely, it is embedded in the culture. We kind of jokingly referenced the fact that Airbnb was founded in 2008. They arrive in France in 2012. We're now the second biggest Airbnb market in the world after the US. But the French have always traveled. They've always traveled. They've also very frequently traveled by car. What we've got to understand is around 40 to 45% of French families actually take their holidays within France itself.
Yep.
And I think a lot of that is kind of very similar to the US, although, as you've referenced, it's not at all the same size of country, is that there's a pretty incredible amount of diversity, but purely geographical diversity within France itself. You've got the Mediterranean, you've got the Atlantic, you've got the North Atlantic, you've got the British Channel, you've got woodlands, you've got mountains, you've got great urban areas, you've got great plains, you've got pretty much everything apart from desert within this landscape. And with global warming, obviously, the further you go south, further it's starting to look like a desert. So we might even have one of those soon. But there's a lot of diversity, and therefore what that means is that the French, who are also typically, they like traveling by car. There's a pretty well-functioning rail system within the country. The French stay in France, so that's very much kind of impacted that, especially with all the holidays that we have in France, whether that be the school holidays, what they call in the winter holidays, the ski holidays, or the fact that, I don't know how frequently or if ever you've been to France in August, which is the month in which we are now, but you go anywhere in France in August and everything's shut because everyone's on holiday for the whole month. So there's very much that culture of like leisure, holidaying, going to destinations, but also very frequently you see repeat guests year on year. You see people going again and again and again to the same destination, whether that be the same house, the same property itself, or just going back to the same village and trying a different house every time. I mean, I think a quick example is our highest, let's say, ranking repeat guest, OVO Network, I think has stayed in one of our properties probably close to 40 times now. And it's a different property each time. So they're just doing the whole portfolio. So you've got a hyper local kind of visitor base or holidaymaker base that loves to travel in their own country. Again, it's geographically much smaller than the US, so it's easier to kind of find that diversity without having to drive, for 10 hours. And then some other slight differences is that it's a market that's becoming more and more regulated, particularly due to in urban areas, a lot of people struggling to find places to rent which aren't ridiculously expensive, which is a whole other subject matter. And then finally, I think the final point on this that I've got is kind of there's a really high share in France of second home ownership. So you've got a lot of people that have got their house in which they live and then the house in which they stay on vacation. But obviously, when they're not there, they've decided to put it to let.
Yeah. No, in studying the French market, it's one of those ones that very mirrored the US in terms of pandemic performance because of its sort of high share of domestic travel. So I think even to this day, like the recent stats, it was almost 70% of bookings through the OTAs were for domestic travel. And for a market that drives so much sort of international inbound, for well over 50% of the demand coming from domestic stays, like that's amazing. And I think really helped the market during the pandemic that when international travel stopped, like it was able to be supported by domestic travel.
Entirely, and even more so, the June, when was it? June 2020, when the lockdown lifted, the first lockdown lifted in France. It was at the time it was our best month ever. So whilst we were kind of crying over what had happened the previous 2 to 3 months, June basically caught up for it all because everyone came to our destinations.
Yeah. No, and then the other sort of question I had for you was around with that second home ownership, sort of high share of second home ownership. Like, is it something that, and it's more of a lifestyle sort of offsetting culture in France, sort of offset some of the costs of home ownership? Or are you guys seeing this sort of investment culture that is really involved and evolved in the US where it's not just that I can buy a second home and rent it out and offset the cost or maybe be revenue neutral, but actually make a return on it, and where it could be an investment and to earn income. And are you guys seeing much of that, or is it more the latter?
Historically, it's been more the former. So historically, it's been more people that, but bearing in mind that we're in a destination which is, again, a ski destination, which a lot of people hold extremely close to their hearts. So people will first and foremost make a lifestyle decision because they've always dreamed to have a ski chalet, and they'll invest in a ski chalet and then they'll rent it out when they're not there. However, more and more we are seeing more and more investors coming in because it's becoming more and more interesting for them to do so. And one thing that we've seen actually in terms of statistics is that we've seen owners who work with us for at least 3 years. If their rental activity works really well, they can actually sell or resell the property at least at minimum 3 years later, with an extra valuation of around 15% if it's attached to a well-functioning rental business. So more and more, I think people are waking up to that. However, as I've said, there was such an explosion that I think we're kind of in uncertain times within the resale market, which again kind of impacts us in a fairly positive way because it just means that more and more people are just deciding to continue to rent.
No, that makes sense. And then you guys have sort of, it seems like paralleled the growth of Airbnb in France. And so you mentioned it's the second largest market. Paris, I think, is the largest market for Airbnb in France. And is there anything else besides just the sort of vacation rental culture in Europe that you think has really led to such high adoption and such strong growth for Airbnb in France? It seemed like it caught on from day one, and in 2012 when they sort of moved there and sort of launched there, and Paris and growth was astronomical. And then, and I was just looking at the numbers And when you sort of mentioned it on the growth that we've seen sort of post pandemic and France, like we're sitting at demand that's now almost 70% higher than 2019 levels. Like that's incredible. That's stronger than we've actually seen in the US in terms of post pandemic demand recovery. And, and the location type that's driven the most growth is in the mountains. So you guys are sort of front and center of it. I've spent some time in the French Alps. I actually stayed in not an OVO property, but in an Airbnb or a short-term rental in Majev. Was there for a few days of the tour, which
Oh,
was
great, amazing.
amazing. Having three stages come through one town and sort of finding a rental that was sort of front and center for all of that worked out and amazing for me and my family that went. But like it seems like something has really caught on and following the French papers and sort of it looks like they have a love-hate relationship with short-term rentals in France too, given sort of impact on the broader housing market and the sort of narrative that comes with it. But is there anything else that you think that's really sort of led to and just it really working in France?
Yeah, I mean, I think as we were kind of referencing, is that whilst for a lot of people they were kind of hotel centric, and then Airbnb arrived, and they've kind of slowly progressed to something new, which is an Airbnb. In France, there were companies like there's one called Gîte de France, which is basically a shared house vacation spot where families always go. And I think the family aspect in France is traveling as a family is something that's a really big deal. I mean, one thing that I like saying is that Airbnb didn't invent the model; it digitized it, because Gîte de France is kind of this very old system where they're kind of falling behind now, obviously. And Airbnb was at the time this kind of new, fresh, young tech company that kind of came in and revolutionized things. I mean, I think I always think back, and I watch this video frequently. There's a conference that's taped and that's on YouTube by a woman called Rebecca Rosenfeld, who worked for Airbnb, I think between 2012 and 2022. And her talk, which is only 80 minutes long, and I highly recommend anyone to listen to it, is called "Going for Global: 5 Guerrilla Tactics When the Slick Stuff Fails," and it's all around guerrilla marketing in France. So she talks around how Airbnb broke into France, and obviously it's a bit old because it's 2012, but it's so interesting to really understand how they did it. And it's all effectively she's just there saying guerrilla offline marketing, having parties, having events, flyers, meeting people, interacting with these French homeowners that instantly it clicked with. And then I think they just kind of rolled with it. And it was like finding a solution, which was in response to all these estate agency companies that up until then had kind of got the monopoly of this market, but were doing things in a very, very old fashioned French bureaucratic way. And then Airbnb just lit a fire up under them, and the whole thing basically totally shifted. And now we're at the forefront of it in terms of volumes of properties, but in terms of processes, I'd argue that France is still a bit behind. We've still not quite digitalized. You can tell by, if you go to Scale France, you can feel that at this event, a lot of the actors will maybe be slightly behind other markets, yet their profitability is ahead and their inventory portfolio size is ahead. But in terms of adopting the right tech, they might be slightly behind. So it's really interesting. And I'm really happy to actually be in this market because it's evolving and it's exciting and it's new and it's fresh.
So how maybe this leads into what you were hinting before. How is OVO going to be able to sort of take advantage of that sort of lack of tech adoption? And seems like with the investment you're putting into building a PMS that you can use, like, and your DNA, we have a PMS, like there's lots of investment, like feel like that investment you'd want to spread out over as many sort of properties as possible. And you've got the digital marketing investment, you've got the revenue management investment, like, and how will you be able to and scale this given the sort of tech play that you have going on?
Yeah, I mean, I think what's really lucky for us is that we've had no outside investment. So the questions of, we've been profitable from day one, and we're well and truly profitable right now. We're doing well. We're increasing our numbers year on year. We're seeing good growth, good progress, and our product is fantastic. We're really confident that any owner whose vision aligns with ours, and that doesn't mean that everyone's does. So somebody that actually wants to kind of spread out their rentals year round, attract clients year round, not put too ridiculous pricings and fee structures and things like that in place is something that aligns perfectly with us. So we're the best solution for those people, and I think what we now need to try and do is build on that. And we'd like to have more properties. So we've grown. Our inventory's probably doubled in the past, let's say, 4 years, which is good. But we definitely want more and more, and there's more and more appropriate properties out there. So that we're totally in a stage of growth for us now. We're trying to aim for first 500, obviously, but just continue to grow and have that then led and automated and more efficient thanks to our PMS.
That's interesting. And in the PMS, and you said that it's sort of primarily, or you guys are primarily direct focus. So I'm assuming you're also sort of distributing through all the other OTAs. If you are almost a direct first business, and how does that sort of morph how you design and sort of build a PMS? Is there something unique there?
I think what's really interesting about being direct focused is that it goes back to data. The ownership of the data that we have, whether it be the number of clicks, the number of views, the time spent on X page, the type of dates that were searched for, etc., etc. All this data, which usually you don't have, or you have through a third-party solution because you're primarily getting eyeballs onto your properties via the OTAs. We've got on our own. So I think that really allows us to then, the PMS then helps us shape the product itself and helps shape the growth of the product, whether that be the platform or the PMS itself, thanks to all this data that's continuously being inputted by these 40,000 visitors that we get every month. So there's that, and then there's also, when we're meeting owners and trying to sign new owners, we're leading with those products. We're leading with the PMS. Look, we've got a fully bespoke PMS that you will have access to. We're leading with the fact that OVOnetwork.com is an exclusive platform that generates X amount of visitors and 80% of direct bookings that you only have access to if you take the full package. So that's how we expand.
Yeah. It seems like with sort of full service property managers, that's one of, in a lot of ways, the thing that's missing. Differentiating between someone that could self-manage, and it's easier than ever to self-manage today, right? The tools that are available today are light years different than when you guys started in 2008, right? Or even in 2015 or 16, but being able to provide them this network that you're going to be able to drive 75 to 80% direct bookings, that you're not going to be reliant on the OTAs, has got to and that's something that is a entirely differentiated offering of, you're going to be competing against 200 other listings on our network, of which we're driving way more demand than could possibly sort of stay in this, versus you're going to be competing with 600 or 60,000 other listings in the Alps on Airbnb. What pool would you rather be sitting in?
Yes, you should say that to all my owners.
But is that something you're able to prove out with them through the ROIs of being able to show them here's the earnings of once you get in front of them, is that sort of a no-brainer terms of sales pitch, or is it more difficult than that?
For new owners, it's fairly easy. So to sign, once we've got the leads kind of in our laps, the sales team do a fantastic job at converting them. It's actually quite hard. It's much harder with existing owners. But when I'm saying existing owners, I'm talking about owners that have been with us for maybe upwards of 10 years, because they've seen an evolution of the market. They've seen an evolution of our fee structure. We've become more expensive. They've seen everything, prices of gas and electricity and stuff like that rise. However, one thing that's remained pretty much constant is their amazing booking performance, which obviously is fantastic for us, but they become accustomed to it and they become blind to the fact that we're doing an amazing job. And I think at some point, especially as you've referenced, with all these tools that are making it easier and easier to do yourself, we are in a situation where occasionally, if an owner leaves us, it will hardly ever be for a competitor. It'll be because either they've decided to sell the property or because they've decided, oh, do you know what? I'm going to do it on my own. And that's the thing that drives me the most crazy, is when somebody leaves to do it themselves, because they're blinded by the success that we've managed to have together. And then at one point they flip. And that's something that we've got to try and manage more. And to manage that in a better way, it's around communicating in a clearer manner on our existing success to existing owners.
That's, I'm sure, extremely difficult. It seems so easy until you have to do it yourself, right?
Yep.
So what you've seen a massive evolution in the market since 2020, the sort of slight pause during COVID, the sort of and massive sort of growth, some of the pullback in demand. Where do you think the industry in France is going over the next couple of years? Like, do you think demand is going to continue to grow? Like, there's a huge sort of opportunity as sort of an emerging sort of middle class throughout in China, India, and all these sort of people that want to travel. And if you think about where's first on their list, like it's going to be France. There's also regulation, and there's also and sort of concerns of over tourism, climate change. Like, where do you think the industry, short-term rental industry, is going in France over and maybe the short and long term?
Yeah, I mean, you've covered a lot of the main points, really. You talked about regulations. It's huge in France at the minute. To be very clear, because you referenced it earlier, you were talking about this love-hate relationship with Airbnb. The recent regulations that came to effect at the end of 2024, which basically just limited a lot of what you could do in terms of short-term rentals.
Yeah.
The name of the law is called the law Le Meur, which is the name of the person that decided to push it through. But it's not called, nobody calls that. Everyone calls it the law anti-Airbnb. If I walk out of my office now in Annecy, which is a very tourist destination, there'll be loads of shop fronts and windows that are covered with anti-Airbnb, signs. Airbnb has become synonymous with over tourism, sadly, and that's also one of our challenges and the challenges of the whole industry, is how to actually differentiate yourself and show that actually there are French-based or locally based professionals here, rather than just being this huge multinational company from San Francisco. So the regulations is going to be complicated. The way to kind of face that is proactively engaging with the local actors, whether that be the mayors and things like that, the local institutions. I mean, there's a common phrase that we use here in France, which is, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. So make sure that you're sitting at the table to avoid being eaten. As you referenced, demand's coming from new markets. So it's how to, again, proactively kind of anticipate that arriving and best position yourself. How to make sure that, I think, especially with the increase of AI and things like that, and that's why one thing that's fundamental to us is to keep that authenticity. Making sure that people are having an authentic stay, authentic experiences, authentic human relationships and interactions, to make sure that they then go back going, that was special, that was out of the ordinary. And kind of building on that, I mean, again, I'm in a really lucky position that I feel that our market is in one of the best places to kind of combat all the challenges. But as we've kind of referenced as well previously, my main worry is actually, whilst there's kind of been this anti-OTA agenda within the industry for the past 15 years, I love Airbnb. I think that the reason why they're so successful is because they're just simply incredibly good at what they do. But more and more with AI and with automation, I do see actually a new challenger kind of maybe taking the place of the OTAs, which is going to be the PMSs themselves. Because the PMSs are going to start to just look at the property manager and say, do you know what? we actually don't need you because our PMS is just automates everything that you do. What we need is just cleaners. So there'll kind of be a return to, oh gosh, actually all we're doing is cleaning toilets and doing the welcoming. And for people that are trying to build a business on top of that, that's where for me over the next 5 years I see is like, and this has kind of been a revelation because we had one of our top 10 performing owners leave us a month ago out of the blue without warning because they've been contacted by a PMS that I won't mention, and that PMS has promised them the same amount of results as we can generate, which we know is false, but they've decided to go with them. So it'll be really interesting to follow how they do, and I'd hope to be able to welcome them back with open arms. But I really think that that's going to be a new challenge, whether it be the OTAs or the PMSs. They're going to automate, and they're going to be a real threat to us, I think.
Yeah. No, the evolution in the PMS space and with the sort of automations that are happening there, more and more competing with, and the OTAs more and more competing with traditional property managers, and sort of that question of, do you do it yourself? I manage my property myself through a PMS, but it is work. And the automations make it easier, but last hosted in 2015 and then bought a property last year and sort of managing myself. But man, it's changed. Man, it's gotten easier, but it's still.
Yeah, we're not there yet, but
No.
I can smell it. I can smell it coming.
You can see it coming with the tech changes, right? So I'm really interested to see how you guys evolve, how the sort of space evolves. I do think there's a lot of, and what you guys are doing around sort of combining the PMS, the revenue management, because revenue management, that's not a set it and forget it sort of thing. Like it's
exactly.
And guest communication just more and more is being automated with AI, but not everything. You've got to have that sort of fail safe of someone to respond, and providing that and sort of package, and where you don't have to have the boots on the ground in terms of cleaning. That is, I wouldn't say easily outsourced, but relatively easily and sort of found in a lot of these markets to find dedicated cleaners. I'm sure it's maybe tougher in some of the markets that you operate, but Louis, thanks so much for joining. Any sort of last words and you want to share with the audience, and especially like if people want to reach out to you, want to learn more, and where can they do that?
LinkedIn. If you type my name into YouTube and Spotify, I'm starting to have quite a lot of podcasts and conferences dispersed around. I'm talking at a few conferences in Europe towards the end of the year. Host Planet in the UK, Scale UK, Scale France. I'm actually organizing a mini event within Scale France this year during a whole afternoon, which is going to be fantastic. But yeah, anyone can reach out to me. I'm very much of an oversharer. I mean, obviously, but all these conferences, none of us are paid to talk, and usually that means that people pay to speak because they've got something to sell. I have nothing to sell whatsoever. I'm just genuinely passionate about what we do, and I love people that are creative and entrepreneurial. And so hit me up on LinkedIn, message me. I'll be happy to answer.
Awesome. Louis, this was a blast chat, and looking forward to seeing Europe this fall.
Yeah, amazing. Thanks, Jamie.